This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Good afternoon and welcome to our Goizueta MBA admissions inside the MBA admissions committee chat. I am joined today by a couple of our folks from the program and the admissions section. Wanted to make sure I invited you today and welcomed you to our first chat of the fall 2016 recruiting cycle. Time is going fast. So thank you for joining us. My name is Angela Bostic. I'm the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer here at the Business School. I will let my colleagues or my co-chat peoples introduce themselves, and then we'll go over a little bit of housekeeping.
Sure. Welcome. My name is Libby Livingston, and I'm Senior Director of Admissions for our full-time MBA programs, and I have been at Goizueta for over 16 years and look forward to chatting with you today.
Great. Welcome. My name is Kelsey Mays, and I am a first year in the 2-year MBA program here at Goizueta.
Fantastic. So Kelsey and Libby are going to be giving you a lot of really great info over the next 45, 50 minutes or so on the chat. We have time from 11 to 12 here, and that will be dependent on how many questions you ask. So that gets us into housekeeping. You can ask your questions at any point in time by typing them directly into the tool. We will field them either on air or behind camera. We've got some folks also monitoring the chat to give some answers as necessary. But we'll make sure that we put your questions slated into the conversation where it makes the most sense. So feel free to ask them at any time. We may get you a response back that tells you we'll answer that in 10 minutes or we'll answer that a little further down the chat when we know that those topics will be covered. But please ask any and everything. The purpose of these chats are for you so that you're informed as you consider and evaluate your MBA program options. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. We're going to talk about some of the topics today that are very common in the process from prospective students to the admissions committee in relation to preparing an application for the MBA program. So we thought we might start with the topic of academic record. And in all these instances, Libby and Kelsey will be giving perspective on their side, but if you have other questions you'd like them to expound on, feel free to ask them. So Libby, the question of the day for academic record has to do with the GMAT versus the GRE. So both tests are acceptable forms for submission. Which does the admissions committee prefer?
Sure. So that is a very common question that we receive from prospective students, and we actually accept the GMAT or the GRE. Either test is fine. It's really important for you to take the test that you feel most comfortable with. I think with the GMAT or the GRE, it's a very intense test, and you definitely need to prepare. And students prepare in different ways. Some, are disciplined and do it on their own, but some actually sign up for a course. So I think either way, you can prepare yourself to take the test. But it's very common for us to see a student take the test more than one time. So I want to share that information because if you think that you're capable of a better score, we suggest that you take it again. It is very common for us to see a student take the test 2 or 3 times. We also do focus more on the quantitative section of either test. We like to see above the 50th percentile in the quantitative section. And so if you are below that, you definitely do want to consider taking the test again.
Wonderful. And then considering that you mentioned other ways people take the test and other timing, Kelsey, talk a little bit about what you did to prepare for your test, which test you took, and kind of advice you might give to prospectives.
Sure. So I took the GMAT, and I used study books and online videos to prepare for the GMAT. I spent most of my Saturdays for about a month at Starbucks and was just going over practice problems, and I really was focusing on the quantitative section. As Libby said, that's very important. And I ended up taking it 2 times. I took it a month apart, and my score improved incrementally the second time. So I was very happy that I retook it in January after taking it originally in December.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to note. In a lot of instances, people ask questions, well, if I take it twice, which of my scores is going to count, or do you average? So,
Sure.
Libby, how does that process work?
Definitely. So we do not average the test scores. We take your highest score, and we encourage you to definitely submit all test scores that you've taken. Sometimes an individual will take the GMAT, and then they'll also take the GRE, and they may just submit one of those test scores to us, their highest, but we definitely encourage you to submit all test scores. We will take your highest score. We will not average those. I don't know a school that averages the test scores. So it's, again, if you think you're capable of a better score, it's in your best interest to take it again.
Fantastic. That's very helpful. And then also talking a little bit more in the academic side of things on What are you looking for by way of the undergraduate experience, grades, GPA, fullness of their academic experience in order to evaluate their ability to perform in the program at Goizueta?
Sure. So undergraduate record is very important, and we are going to be looking at where you went to school, the types of courses that you've taken, your major, your course load. All of that's going to be information that we're going to be reviewing. In addition, if you have done graduate work, we will be evaluating that information. When you see our kind of profile of our class that is online, we are looking at your undergraduate GPA. So our average, for our 2-year and 1-year program is about a 3.3, 3.4, and that is based on your undergraduate record. We look at candidates from all different majors. You do not have to be an undergraduate business major to apply to the MBA. We look at all majors are welcome to apply.
Wonderful. And while we're still on that topic, and because we've gotten a few questions on it, and I figured it would come up, the idea of scholarships and how those relate to your academic experience or your test scoring. I know that there is a particular process we follow at Goizueta about our scholarships and how those are bestowed. Libby, can you share that with our viewers so they understand kind of more how that scholarship process works?
Sure. So we definitely have a lot of great scholarship opportunities here at Goizueta, and all students that apply by our round 3, which is our January deadline, are automatically considered for scholarship. So there's no additional application that you need to do. We are going to be looking at the merit of your application. It is not need-based, it is merit-based. And most students that receive a scholarship are going to definitely fall within our GMAT ranges, as well as close to the GMAT average. So you can see our GMAT ranges online, but our GMAT range for the 1-year program is a 560 to a 710, and for the 2-year program it's a 620 to a 730. So you definitely want to fall within that 80% range. And again, as I mentioned with the test scores, if you think you're capable of a better score, take it again, because not only are you being considered for admission, but you're also being considered for the scholarship opportunities that we have here at Goizueta.
Wonderful. And that kind of leans into what Kelsey was mentioning in taking her test twice, which sounded like it benefited you. Hopefully I'm not embarrassing you, but I know you are a scholarship recipient. So talk a little bit about what that process was like for you for applying here, and if you applied to other programs, the ease or process for the scholarship here at Goizueta.
It was very easy. As I said, I retook the GMAT, so that was potentially the hardest part. But in terms of preparing my application, I prepared it just like I would for applying to school. There were no additional essays or additional requirements that I had to do to be considered for scholarships, and that was awesome. That was a huge relief. And so I prepared the best application I possibly could, and in turn wound up getting an awesome scholarship.
Yeah, and I think that's the value as you're going through this process of applying, and often, like Kelsey, if you're very talented and applying to a number of schools, the burden of adding the additional essays or submitting additional information can sometimes get to be overwhelming. It is intentionally built like this at Goizueta so that the fullness of your application is evaluated up front, and there's not additional things for you to do. But as Libby mentioned, it is very valuable for you to put forth your best application, whether that means best test scores or best essays or anything else. The fullness of your application is what will be evaluated. So make sure that you make the best application you can. So we're going to move on to the next topic, which is talking about work experience. And I know that work experience is something that is important to have in an MBA program, but not like a lot of other graduate programs where you don't often have a lot of work experience. It's very important to have work experience here. So Libby, if you don't mind talking about how many years should people have, what kind of experience, what are you looking for, and how can an applicant best present their work experience?
So we look at all different types of work experience. So we're not looking for a particular person in a particular background. We have your traditional business backgrounds that come into our program, but we also have students that come from the military or engineering or nonprofit or teaching. So we look at a variety of different backgrounds. What's most important is the quality of your work experience. And we do want to see, ideally, that a student has, when they apply, about 2 years of full-time work experience. We're looking at work experience since you completed your undergraduate university work, and we'd like to see students in the application process with 2 years, so by the time they enroll in our program, they have 3 years. And the reason for that is that you're able to really contribute a lot in the classroom, having had that experience, but also many of our recruiters in our Career Center have the expectation that you have work experience, and they are expecting you to have about 3 years to be competitive for the positions that they're recruiting our students for. So definitely want students to have the full-time work experience.
Awesome. And knowing that that work experience is important for the recruiting process is helpful, but it's also very valuable in the classroom. And so being able to have the fullness of that represented across the class is helpful. Kelsey, talk a little bit about your past work experience, so what you were doing kind of before you came to Goizueta, and how you feel like that may be playing into your experience here in the program.
Sure. So I was in investment banking for 4 years before starting here at Goizueta, and it's incredibly helpful to have those 4 years under my belt. And I think it's also helpful because my peers have had, 2 to 6 years, or sometimes even more, of work experience. And so in the classroom, people are able to bring relevant examples and talk about different things that they did at work and how it relates to a problem we're trying to tackle in finance or a case we're discussing in marketing. So it makes our conversations very vibrant and interesting and relevant to the real world. And in recruiting, it's also very helpful because I've already started to see that recruiters will ask what you did before and will ask you to relate what you did before to what you're recruiting for. So the more that you did before, the easier those conversations are, and I think the more successful your recruiting process will be.
And I think when you're looking at that, it also helps to come in knowing how to talk about the work you've done, but also hearing from your peers and what they've done in their industry if you decide you want to change careers or you're looking to make a switch, to sort of be able to learn the language and get the vernacular under for interviews and other processes. So the work experience can be a very important part to be able to consider. In addition, we had a question about kind of work experience, and is there anything that needs to be seen besides a resume? Is there like a CV that needs to be submitted or any other details related to work experience beyond just the details of what you've done?
Right. So on your application, we actually do ask that you list each position that you've had and details about that position, kind of some of your responsibilities and the dates of when you were in that particular company or organization. So that would be, in your application. We also do require a resume. We do prefer a one-page resume. Coming to business school, one of the first things that you're going to do is to get your resume in a one-page format. So we encourage you to go ahead and start working on that and get it into a one-page format. And, if you have, probably more than 10 years of experience, then, it is okay if you need to go to a second page, but definitely prefer the one page. And I think it's, helpful to highlight what's most important to you on your resume and to give definitely results, within your resume, within each position, and definitely highlight some of your leadership activities that you've done in undergraduate and since then in the community, because that's something that we'd like to see. And you can also highlight that information in the application as well.
Fantastic. So I just wanted to take a pause here and thank you guys for submitting such great questions. We're going through them as we speak, so you'll be getting responses from either folks in the back who are answering your questions or myself on the chat, sort of letting you know where in the queue we'll get to those. We're going to move on and talk a little bit about essays now. And I think that's an important topic because it's often overlooked, and sometimes the committee sees that they're overlooked. There are lots of ways that your essays can benefit you, but also can work against you. So love to hear, Libby, your thoughts on what are the best ways to prepare your essays? How can you make sure that they stand out, that they do the most work for you? And then what are sort of the thoughts around whether you guys actually read the essays, or is it just something you make sure you check a box off and say, yes, Susie had an essay?
Right. So we definitely read your essays. That's one, probably one of my favorite parts of reviewing an application is reading your essays, because it allows you to really share with us your story. So we have 4 essays that are required and allows you to kind of share your goals and your plans and why you want the MBA and why now and why at Goizueta. Also a leadership-focused essay, some sentence completion, and then we always have our last one is a fun fact about you, which we really enjoy reading those. So essays are important. Definitely take the time, spend the time on the essays. I think it's helpful to prepare them, maybe ask a friend, a colleague, a family member to review your essays, and maybe do not provide the essay question to them and see if they can tell you what the question is. just to make sure that you've included all the information that you should and that you've been able to articulate your experiences. So that's definitely a tip I suggest to do. And definitely, answer the question being asked in the word limits given. We do have those, kind of requirements listed for a reason, so please address that information and definitely proof it. We, oftentimes we'll see someone with a different school's name, in our essays, and it doesn't make a great impression when that happens. So definitely proof your essays. And I do also want to mention many schools have optional essays, and this is an opportunity for you to kind of share additional information that you've not had the opportunity to share yet. So maybe you get to the end of your application and you realize that, I'd really like to share maybe a concern that you have in your application. Maybe you feel that you have a weakness that you'd like to address. That is a great place to address that information in that optional essay. The optional essay is not a place to put an essay from another school that you thought you did really well and that you'd really like us to read. That is not, what you want to do. But it is a place that if you feel there's a semester you want to address, if you had, a rough, semester grades-wise, or you maybe have a gap in your work experience that you want to share with us, or maybe you want to go in a little more detail by why you've selected the recommenders that you've selected, that is a great place to share information in that optional essay.
Wonderful. And that's really helpful, I think, as students prepare, especially if you are, like many candidates, applying to many schools. So, Kelsey, in your process, talk a little bit about the schools, number of schools you applied to, and how did you prepare essays to make sure you were presenting the best version of yourself to kind of each school?
Sure. So I kept it small, and I applied to 3 schools. So I spent the most time brainstorming for each of my essays, and I found that really important because my gut reaction when I read an essay question was not always what I ended up writing about. And so I think taking a week or so to really think about the best way to answer the question was very helpful for me. And since I was doing 3 different applications in a fairly short time frame, I tackled each one individually to avoid what Libby was saying about accidentally answering one school's question or getting confused for the main point of each of my essays. And in terms of the reviewing, I actually had my little sister review it, and she was really just looking for grammatical errors and making sure she understood the point and understood the question that I was trying to answer. So, just having a friend or a sibling or somebody just glance over it, I think, is really all you need. But that brainstorming part I found to be very, very helpful.
I think it's important just kind of to get yourself out of it. It's difficult. You've been looking at the essays. You've written the essays. Sometimes it's hard to be, subjective. So you want to make sure somebody else is doing that review for you. So that's very helpful. We're going to move on to talk a little bit about recommendations. And I know that recommendations and recommenders is an important part of the process. And trying to figure out who should do them for you, how far in advance, what should they talk about. So Libby, kind of from the admissions committee perspective, who are the right people to do recommendations for candidates, and how should a candidate prepare their recommender to ensure that the recommendation that they get is in line with what you all would want to see?
Sure. So we do require 2 recommendations, and we prefer the recommendations to be from your professional experience, so not faculty members. So someone that's managed you or supervised you in a professional setting, and someone that can really talk about the impact that you've made within your company or your organization. So we do prefer to have, a current manager or supervisor write a recommendation. Those are great people to ask. Maybe a client, maybe, you're an entrepreneur, so you can definitely think about people that you've worked with in that area. And, we're interested in getting someone that can really share examples of how you've made this impact within the organization. So it's, when you go back all the way to a faculty member, they're not going to be able to share, as much detail and information that we're interested in seeing. So I think it's helpful also to sit down with your recommender, explain, what you're doing, why you're going to business school, and, kind of why Goizueta, and what your goals are, what your plans are, why are you, what are you thinking about doing in the short term. And I think that sitting down with them and sharing that information can really give them the background to do a strong recommendation for you. And I think that, students that, feel like that they, want to do a third recommendation, that is fine as well, but we do have the 2 that are required. The third could be someone maybe that you've worked with in the community, a community organization, or if you were really engaged with a faculty member during undergrad and you did research for them or you did an assistantship with them, a third optional rec could be great in that situation. And we do realize that you may not be telling your current manager that you're applying to business school, which we do understand. So I think in that situation, maybe looking back at a past manager or maybe a teammate, a colleague, those are individuals that you could ask if you're in a situation like that.
That makes sense. And I'm sure as you're at different stages and phases of evaluating the program, the right recommender might be different for each individual. Kelsey, what did you do to prepare your recommenders? And then sort of how did you help them to write a persuasive recommendation for you?
Right. I had 2 recommenders that were actually 2 people senior to me in the bank that I worked with most closely. And so I was very open with them about my plans to go to business school, which was very helpful because by being open, I was able to ask the people that worked with me all of the time. But when I asked them to write my recommendations, we had a 15-minute meeting, and I came prepared with my resume. And I also came prepared with a brief overview of the rest of my application package. So I talked to them about some things that I was trying to highlight in my essays, and that I hoped maybe they could echo or reflect if they felt the same way in my recommendations. And I also brought some notes about things that were important to my development over the 4 years, because I knew that they wouldn't remember everything that happened over 4 years as well as I would remember it. So I really tried to remind them about, remember this project that I did so well on, or remember when I stepped up, when this person was out, and really tried to remind them of some important things that I did in my career that hopefully that they could write in their recommendations.
Yeah, and I think that's clear. Being able to set that time aside is very helpful. We have a question related to the recommendations I want to make sure I get in before I move on. And there are some standard templates for recommendations you can find online. Lots of websites will tell you how to use those. Would you recommend using that or something different to the Emory-specific template for it? Does it matter which version people use?
So we would like you to use our online recommendation forms. That's most important. We do sometimes, get questions about the individual, type it up and just upload that information and not actually do it into our form. And that is okay, but we do prefer candidates to address all the questions that we are asking and definitely complete the grid that we have within the recommendation form, because that's specific information that we are seeking. And so many of those courses will probably be similar to maybe some of the other recommendations they might be completing. So it is possible, but we do want them to address all the questions that we're asking on our forms.
Great, thank you. So we're going to move on and talk a little bit about the interview process. And again, if you have more questions, please feel free to keep submitting them. We're peppering them in as we go along. So in terms of the interview, this is kind of something I think people, maybe worry about in exams. So what is an interview going to be like? From the admissions committee perspective, what is an admissions interview like? How does it differ from a typical interview? What should a candidate prepare for? What should they expect? And how can they have a good showing?
Sure. So with the interview, our interview is about 30 minutes in length, and we are really wanting to get a sense of a candidate's experience. We're going to be looking at their resume during the interview, wanting to have the candidate share kind of a high-level overview of their positions that they've held so far, as well as why they're interested in MBA, why Goizueta, and definitely want to learn about their short-term goals during this 30-minute conversation. It really is more of a conversation. It's not stressful. It is a conversation with me or one of my colleagues, or we do have a number of alumni that help us on Saturday interview days. So all of those interviews are, considered equal with the alumni as well as the admissions committee members. You do just one interview during the process. We have had an open interview period during mid-August to mid-October. That's winding down, and so once we hit our first deadline, which is October 14th, at that point it is invitation only after a review of a completed application. So it is important to note that it is a completed application, so make sure all pieces of your application are in to be considered for the interview, and then we will interview you within that round. So you should prepare for the interview like a job interview. It could be helpful to sit down with someone, have them ask you some questions related to some of the things that I just mentioned that we want to learn about. But you don't want to sound too rehearsed, but I think that just talking more about what you're doing will be helpful in that interview conversation. I'm sure a lot of people at this point in the process are asking you, why are you doing this? Why are you getting this MBA? Use that as an opportunity to share your story and your goals and what it is that you want to do and accomplish through the MBA.
Great. And Kelsey, if you can remember back onto your interview process, I imagine you might have interviewed this lady right here. What was that like, and what kind of advice on top of that would you give to prospects?
It was very comfortable. I think comfortable and conversational are the ways that I would describe it. I interviewed with Libby, and from the moment that I walked in, I felt calm, and I think that that was very important, and that had to do with the environment here and also with the preparation I did. So if I had a piece of advice, it would be to really research and understand the schools that you're interviewing for and know what's unique about them, and to practice with a friend and walk through your resume and really talk about why you want to go to that particular school and why it's a good fit for you and why you're choosing to go to business school in general. So putting a little bit of time in beforehand and just approaching it like a conversation are really, I think, the key to it. But yeah. I had a great experience, and part of the reason I'm here.
That's a good point. We had a couple questions that came in earlier that I think relate well to this idea of preparing by understanding the schools you're looking at. And so, Libby, there are some questions about what are the things that students need to know, are the key selling points, or the most important distinguishing factors about the one-year program versus the two-year program, and technically what should they make sure that they're referencing when they're talking with you and how they should consider it. So love you to give some perspective about those two programs, the one-year and the two-year, how they are the same, but then also how they differ, and what points you suggest that individuals are able to talk to when they come in their interview. Should they be prepared to talk about the offerings of the school, the career backgrounds, the success areas? What do they need to demonstrate that they are genuinely interested in the program?
Mm-hmm. Well, we definitely, want you to have done some research, on Goizueta, our program offerings. We do realize that we make it easy for candidates to apply to more than one program. You might be considering both the two-year as well as the one-year. You could be considering one of our full-time programs as well as our part-time evening program. So we make it easy for candidates because we realize that you're not sure at this point. You have a lot more to think about. You want to kind of do some more research, do some more informational interviews, talk to more of our individuals here at Goizueta, maybe through the Career Center, or our alumni, our current students, to really get a sense of what's going to be the program that's going to be the best fit for you. But students can apply to more than one program, and it's very easy to do. Within the one-year and the two-year program, it doesn't even cost you an additional fee. There's no additional fee to apply to the two-year as well as the one-year. And ideally, you'd get admitted if you apply to both those programs, to both, and that will give you more of an opportunity to do more research, as I mentioned. So, with the two-year program, it's your traditional two-year with the internship in between. Many students that do that program are making a career switch. Not all. Some are still kind of really going to enhance their career, and they may consider the two-year. They want to have the internship experience. But students in the one-year program are very focused on what they want to do, and what they want to do is an internship is not needed to make that adjustment into the next role that they're going to take. So it's that's what you really need to look at, is that, do I need an internship to do what it is that I want to do? And if the answer is yes, then you're going to want to lean more towards thinking about a 2-year program, where again, most of career searchers would go into that program. The 1 year, you're kind of building on your past experience. You can make a shift in the 1-year program, but it's not going to be from accounting to brand management. I mean, that's something that you would need an internship to do. So I think that when you think about the programs themselves, the 1-year program is a very full experience, just like the 2-year program. The 1 year, the only thing that's different, there's 2 things actually. One is you don't have an internship, and the other is that you cannot study abroad for a full semester. Those are the main differences. But having said that, there are a lot of international opportunities that 1-year students get to take advantage of. There's actually one at the end of the summer that's just the 1-year students, an international module. And then, of course, each spring, all of our students do a mid-semester module. So our 2-year students in their first and second year have the opportunity to do a mid-semester module. And then the 1-year students in that spring semester, their last semester. So, 1-year students are able to fit in the international trips as well. So it's definitely a full experience. And it's just a matter of really kind of figuring out what's going to be best for you and what you, want to, if you want to do it in an accelerated format. So the 1 year you do the core in 12 weeks, and in the 2-year program you're doing it in 15 to 16 weeks. You're doing the core. So when coming to the interview, definitely do your research. I think it's helpful to come with a couple of questions. We won't have time to address a huge list of your questions at that time. But come with some questions that maybe you can't easily find on our website, maybe something specific to one of the formats, the 1 year or the 2 year. There's great ways to interact with our students in the process right now. If you go to our kind of the home page of the full-time MBA and you go to admissions, and then you go to, you'll see where you can connect with an ambassador really easily. You can connect with a 2 year, you can connect with a 1 year, or both, and allow you to have some time to really think about the different program formats. But come to the interview with a couple of questions that, kind of a question that you can't really easily find and that you'd like a little bit more information about.
Yeah, and as we've talked a little bit more about the different interests and opportunities within the programs, I want to stay in that vein because there have been a couple of questions around different types of programs. So in particular, the MBA MPH program and some of our other joint programs. So I know that there are differences between our 1 year and 2 year programs in terms of how those joint degrees are experienced. So love you to touch on that.
Sure.
And to also talk a little bit about the integration process. So how does it work if I'm a student interested in an MBA MPH or a JD MBA? What does my route look like? And then how would I evaluate that program?
So we do offer several joint degree programs, and I'd say that our most popular are our MBA MPH and our MBA JD. And on our website, there are there's information there. There's a section with joint degrees, and so I definitely encourage you to check that out because it goes into a little bit more detail about each specific joint degree program. We also have a joint degree program with our MD MBA, as well as DPT, which is physical therapy in the MBA, and also MBA in our divinity school, Candler. So these are all options. So with the MBA MPH, that joint degree program is actually with our 2 year program. So if you're interested in applying for that joint degree, you would apply to the 2 year program. If you're interested in the MBA JD or the MBA MDiv, which is with Candler, you have the option to apply to the 2 year or the 1 year program. And if you go to those links, you can see kind of how that's structured. With the MD MBA as well as our physical therapy and MBA, it is with our 1 year program. So if you're thinking about those programs, you'd want to apply to the 1 year.
And the differences, I think, in there are inherent, but there are lots of opportunities for you to consider. And in particular, if you want to go visit the website for that, it's in our admissions section. We have a breakdown of all of our joint degree programs, as well as the different details on how those are experienced. But I also got some questions around opportunities for areas like what kind of clubs and activities are in the program, what kind of ways can you experience Goizueta when you're here. So Kelsey, if you don't mind sharing a little bit of details of sort of opportunities you've taken advantage of now or things you're looking forward to doing in the future.
There are so many opportunities. So I'm actually involved in 3 clubs, and there are like 6 more clubs that I would like to be involved in, but I don't have the time. There's a Women in Business club, there's a finance club, general management and operations. So there are a lot of clubs that have to do with your career. that are very helpful in terms of recruiting and interview practice. There's also clubs that just generally have to do with your interests. There's a lot of different sports clubs. There's a club to practice different languages. So there's like, you name it, there is a club for it, or you can find people who want to do that with you. And in terms of other ways to be involved on campus, there are volunteer activities. I'm going to be volunteering at the zoo at the end of the month with some students. There are groups of people that go out to eat at different restaurants every weekend. You name it, you can be involved. And it's really a matter of how much you have time for and not any sort of lack of opportunities. And there are structured programs like the mid-semester module and short study abroad programs that I'm really looking forward to, but I haven't participated in them yet.
And I think it's important to note that there's a fullness of the curriculum that really can't be displayed in a 45-minute chat or even on our website. But there are lots of sections that I would highly recommend you to look at. We've sent some details over, but if you're interested in global opportunities or ways that there's travel, international experience, there's a section inside of both the 1-year and 2-year programs in the curriculum area that talks about global. Some of those are curricular opportunities, some are co-curricular opportunities, so things that aren't necessarily just a course. But you'll see the details and specificity there, and I would highly recommend that being a place you go to sort of digest that information. Similarly, if you're looking at clubs and activities, case competitions, and those are the like, the student experience section of our website has a detail of all the types of clubs. They are a lot. So I would highly recommend that if you're interested, when you find some clubs in the area, following Libby's advice, we have a number of ambassadors, so individuals who have committed to support the admissions area and talk about all types of topics. Most of them have listed what other activities they're involved in, so they're a great way to find out not just what the clubs are, but what it's like to be a part of them. So definitely visit our admissions section to get a listing of our ambassadors and see if there's somebody who lines up with what you're looking for. So we're going to close it out around the topic of evaluating MBA programs. And I think this is an important one because there's a lot packed into this thought, right? The idea that you're going to be applying to lots of schools and there are lots of things to consider. So I'm going to talk a little bit with Libby about some of the questions and topics you guys have had. What makes Goizueta distinctive? Why should I want to look at the program? But also, as I'm considering other MBA programs, how should I compare it? Are there things like the small class size or the faculty engagement or even being in the city of Atlanta that I should really think about as I'm looking across schools? So love you to answer that and to figure out how you would tell somebody to evaluate our program against others.
So we have a unique combination here at Goizueta, and the first is just this world-class business education. And, students come and have a very rigorous academic experience. We have a front-loaded core, which I think students find really valuable. It is intense, definitely intense, but, the advantage of that is that you can jump into your electives in the second semester. And I think students find that really valuable, to be in, some of the electives when you're doing your internship interviews, and then have had, 5 electives when you start your internship in the summer. So I think that that's really valuable. And, I think that's a huge advantage, when you think about your educational experience. But it is rigorous, and so definitely something that we have a strong focus on is your academic experience here. We also have a very small, intimate environment. So yes, we realize that other business schools are going to have a strong world-class business education, but when you think about having that in an environment where your class is 160 to 180 students for the 2-year program, for the 1-year program it's 60 to 70 students, it's very small, very intimate. You're going to know every single person in your class. The relationships that you can make are amazing, as well as the relationships that you develop with your faculty. Faculty have an open door policy, they're passionate about teaching, but they're also doing research, doing consulting can be a great resource to you during your time here, as you're doing research projects as well as your career search. So this intimate environment is great. When you look at top 20 schools, when you think about, we are the smallest program in the top 20. And in addition to that, we are located in a great city. Atlanta is a great business city. We're number 3 for Fortune 500 headquarters, but many of the 750,000 of the 1,000 companies have operations and a presence here as well. And so the resources that you have in the city is amazing, and we tap into that. We take advantage of that. All of our professors are able to engage with companies, and students are able to take advantage of that even in the first semester. And so being located in the city is a huge advantage. And when you think about other small programs that are, that you may be considering, but they may be in small towns. So, we have this unique combination of a strong world-class education in a small, intimate environment in such a great business city. So that is our unique combination that we offer. And I think with Atlanta, we have the busiest airport. You can go pretty much anywhere in the world in a straight flight, and that's something to definitely consider when you're going to be recruiting, when you're here as a student. And it's a very livable city as well. So it's, it's a wonderful place to live. It's a very affordable city. It's something you definitely should consider when thinking about you're going to be on a student budget. So, so that's really, kind of, our unique advantage. But I think that when thinking about how do you demonstrate, kind of your interest and how do I evaluate programs, I think visiting is really key. We realize that that may not be possible for students that are, international students or students that are living abroad, but you're engaging with us at events like this. There's ways to connect with our ambassadors. There's, definitely ways to engage with our alumni. And so I encourage you to do that because you really need to get a sense of the fit. I think that oftentimes I hear students say, I had my list of schools, my top 5 schools, and I kind of had an order in my mind. But after I visited those schools, that order changed. So the fit is so important. And so, people end up visiting at different points in the process, and that is fine. Some people visit during, kind of before you've submitted your application. Some visit when they're doing their interview. Some actually visit and wait till they've already been admitted and they come to our welcome weekend. So any time is fine, but just please try to visit, or if you can't visit, engage with our community before you make your final decision.
Great advice, and I think I can't stress enough how engaging with the school is important. So yes, events like this where you can do a webinar and then virtually visit are very valuable. Opportunities to talk with students and alumni who can talk about the program and can give you a taste and a feel for it are very, very valuable. But prioritize that if it's a school that you're looking to attend, you should see sort of what it's like to be there as best as humanly possible in the process. So Kelsey, on your side, talk about what you think makes the Goizueta program distinctive. So what are your groups like? What have your first semester classes been like? Mm-hmm. How has that experience kind of matched your expectations?
It has completely exceeded my expectations. I have had an amazing start here at Goizueta. And I think some of the most exceptional parts are the size. I went to a small undergrad, and I knew that I really liked an intimate learning environment. And here at Goizueta, it's even smaller than my undergrad, and that's been awesome. I think I know at least 90% of my classmates already, which is great. Because I think that network, I really truly am going to carry it with me because I'm able to have strong relationships with many of them, and we all hang out together, and we're all really here to help each other and get to know each other, and it being a small class really helps facilitate that. And in terms of the faculty support, I think having a small class really has its advantages, and I've been able to go to office hours. They have an open door policy to meet many of my professors. I'm going to be meeting one of my professors in a couple of hours so he can help me with a project I'm working on, and I have the ability to go and talk to them whenever I want, and they know me by name, and they know what I did before school, and are really truly willing to help me as a person rather than just because they need to. So that, and then being in Atlanta has been amazing. I love Atlanta. It's a great city, and I like being in an urban environment. I was looking at a couple of other schools that weren't in as big of cities, and I'm really happy that I'm here because I'm able to schedule coffee chats and informational interviews with professionals in Atlanta and drive down the street to go meet them versus get on a plane or just have to talk to them on the phone. So I've really seen that advantage in terms of my recruiting process getting started. I've met people who are willing to come to Emory just to meet me for coffee because they like Emory and they like Atlanta, and so that's been extremely valuable.
That's great. Thank you. That's helpful. I have one more question, and then we're going to get ready to wrap things up. So if you have any other questions, you haven't submitted them yet, keep them turning in. We've had an amazing amount of questions today so far, so thank you. There was a question coming in about how student groups are structured and put together. So I know that there is an intentional process the program office does to ensure that your project teams that you work together are from different backgrounds, different cultures, different interests, so that you have the fullness of the experience. But Kelsey, I'd love you to talk a little bit about your project teams and sort of what you've gained from that so far.
I was actually talking to my father this morning about this. I think the project team has been one of the most valuable things I've participated in here so far. So we have a team of 6, and we are all completely different. We have different interests. There are a couple of people who are parents. We are all from different parts of the world. It's sometimes hard to find what we do have in common other than being here at Goizueta, but that's what makes the experience so valuable, because our discussions are vibrant. We all have different viewpoints. We, work together. We debate different projects. And that ends up helping us to create a better project in the end, because we have, we don't always agree, and we have different points of view, and we really kind of test each other and challenge each other in a healthy way. And on a personal note, I've been able to learn about people from different backgrounds and get to know people with experiences totally different from mine, and learning how to manage a team that isn't all like me, and learning how to work with people who don't agree with the way I think. So it's awesome, and I know it is deliberately created that way. My friends on other teams have had similar experiences where everybody's different and they're having these super incredible discussions. So I think it's an awesome part of the Goizueta experience, and it speaks to the caliber of students here, and the program really truly being holistic. And so I think the team environment and the emphasis on group work is awesome.
That's great. I think, Libby, that'd be awesome for you to get close to kind of closing us out by talking about what the committee likes to do in order to make the fullness of a class, right? How do you evaluate so that you have a class that can create backgrounds and differences and conversation that is constructive and valuable, like what Kelsey is describing?
Sure. So we're looking at every piece of your application. We oftentimes get the question, well, is it a weighted application? Is there one piece that's more important than the other? Yes. Ultimately, we need to know that you're going to be academically successful, in our program, our rigorous program. But we're really looking at all aspects. Everything is really important. Every piece of your application is reviewed in detail. Every interaction that you have on campus, as soon as you enter campus, and it could be with someone at the front desk, every interaction is evaluated and reviewed. So I think that you really want to take the time to think about each aspect of your application. I realize can be overwhelming, but I think in the end, students really find that this application process has been a time where they could really self-reflect and have some introspection, and in the end, it's been really valuable. They're super excited when they submit, when they hit the submit button, and can kind of put the application in and kind of wait for decisions, and because it is a huge process. We realize that. We do realize it takes a lot of time, and just want you to know that we evaluate each candidate individually and go into great detail of their application, and look forward to reviewing your applications. We do have our first deadline October 14th. We also have a deadline in November, as well as in January, and January is the most important deadline you need to meet. Because that is our scholarship deadline, and then we do have a deadline in March as well, which is, a deadline I would suggest to try to avoid. Definitely apply before that deadline date if at all possible.
Great, thank you. This is really helpful. We got through, close to 60 questions, so thank you so much for such great conversation. Thank you, Libby and Kelsey, for your perspective and your advice. I'm sure that the folks who are watching appreciate it. For those of you who've asked, and also for those who didn't ask, we'll be providing this link for this chat in about 5 to 7 business days. You'll have a link to that, as well as the admissions committee has prepared some slides to help you as you go through your application. A reminder of some of these details, but also some specificity of how you can affect your essays or your recommendations or present your information in the most possible way so you can have the most competitive MBA application. So you'll receive an email from us with a link to the video as well as a link to those slides. And as Libby has mentioned before, she looks forward to reviewing your application. I'm sure Kelsey and I look forward to welcoming you to campus sometime soon. So have a great rest of your day.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.